Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture.
My name is Dr. Sharon Johnson, and I am the focal point for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. It is my pleasure to be your MC for this morning's launch of Heritage Month. The Honorable John King, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office with responsibility for culture, Mr. J. Hugh Wiltshire, Permanent Secretary in the Division of Culture, Prime Minister's Office, Ms. Alessandra Cummins, Chairperson of the Barbados National Commission, Ms. Samantha Allen of the University of the West Indies, Mr. Steve Devenish, Chairperson of the Barbados World Heritage Committee and Site Manager for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison, members of the Division of Culture, Prime Minister's Office, members of the Barbados World Heritage Committee, fellow Barbadians, members of the media. A blessed good morning to you. Some people are viewing us on the Zoom chat and others are viewing us through the National Library Services YouTube channel. We are here today to launch Heritage Month 2021. I would now invite the Permanent Secretary, Mr. J. Hugh Wiltshire, to welcome you officially.
Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison.
Amen.
Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Pick it up! Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic bridge town and its garrison. Pick it up! Our bridge town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. Pick it up! This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Big it up, our military we celebrate for centuries of history. Big it up, tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison.
I will now call on Ms. Alessandra Cummins, the chairperson of Barbados National Commission, to deliver her remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I am extremely pleased to be present with you all this morning to deliver a short message on behalf of the National Commission of Barbados for UNESCO. In an increasingly complex, uncertain, and unstable world, our ability to adapt depends on our ability to anticipate and to look ahead to the future. This is what futures literacy is all about. And this is the context in which I will address this morning's session on the launch of National Heritage Month. We are experiencing one of the greatest technological disruptions at this point in time. I want to note, however, that this did not displace Barbados's actions in accord with UNESCO's programs. For example, Barbados played a significant role by hosting the virtual sub-regional consultation on the draft recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence in August of last year. 22 regional experts from the Dutch and English-speaking Caribbean rigorously debated all aspects of this document, and they were pleased to receive closing remarks from the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, on that occasion. Small island developing states remain a key priority for Barbados and CARICOM within UNESCO's program and budget. And Minister King will particularly recall the strategizing that took place in the margins of UNESCO's 2019 General Conference in order for SIDS to receive enhanced prioritization within the new medium-term strategy and the program and budget. We were particularly pleased on March 30th of this year to be introduced to the newly appointed chief of the SID section, Zulmira Rodriguez, and her team, and to hear their presentation on the 2021 strategic priorities for UNESCO's in the Caribbean sub-region. The major work of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the IOC, remains of vital importance for the survival of our vulnerable countries and territories in SIDS, not just in the Caribbean, but elsewhere. One of the key areas where we have been able to help with and support the work of the IOC is with the creation and support of the CTIC, the Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, which is our key connection here, apart from other work which is done within the IOC itself. One of the other ways in which UNESCO has been working has been to draw attention to the work of building inclusive knowledge societies, especially in relation to the dangers of misinformation. In this regard, heritage does in fact play a key role in this sector, particularly through the organization's International Memory of the World program, which has remained in suspension for too long, but we are looking forward to its reopening and the resumption of one of UNESCO's most inclusive and activist programs. In addition, we are all the beneficiaries of UNESCO's newest CO-based International Center for Documentary Heritage, where the ICDH seeks to enhance the visibility and viability of the MOW program. Now, culture is currently experiencing an unprecedented crisis in terms of the implications for the cultural actors who need to be able to rise above the crisis that COVID has inflicted on us. But one aspect of this is the museums around the world. 90% of the world's museums have been closed temporarily due to COVID-19. 10% of these may never recover. Less than 1.5% of the world's museums exist in the extremely vulnerable situations in Africa and SIDS, which obviously has implications for us here in the Caribbean and Barbados. Thus, the region's museums and heritage professionals exist in circumstances similar to artists and creators who live in a state of precarity. There's a lot of work to be done in this area, but UNESCO in particular organized a survey, the Resiliart Survey, and a series of Resiliart debates in more than 70 countries on all continents. I'm pleased to note that Barbados did in fact contribute to the survey so that it helped create a profile of the Caribbean cultural context during lockdown. Of particular importance as an outcome of these debates is the UNESCO report on culture in crisis, with a policy guide for a resilient creative sector, which was published in October of 2020. Not only does it present measures implemented worldwide to address the crisis in the culture sector, but it also identifies collective actions to minimize structural and long-term impacts. So we look forward to benefiting from the use of this policy guide, where UNESCO has called for a broad coalition to support the cultural ecosystem and insist on the fact that there will be no recovery, no real recovery without culture. Minister King, during his mission in Paris in 2019, was deliberate and determined in his efforts to support the strengthening of the Slave Root Project. Under threat from diminution and even deletion from the organization's program and budget, Barbados was thus a signatory to the General Conference's 40C Resolution 40, which instead called for the organization to, and I quote, strengthen its commitment to Slave Root Project through a strategic framework that is better adapted to the cultural current context in order to capitalize on social demands for positive, tangible, and sustainable progress. In particular, it looked towards the work being done in the second part of the International Decade for People of African Descent, the work that surrounds the general history of Africa and by extension, the general history of the Caribbean, in particular, the teaching materials developed for primary and secondary schools for their inclusion in national curricula, and the development and preparation of a new volume devoted to African diasporas around the world. This is particularly important for us in the Caribbean as it ensures a solid historical grounding of contemporary understandings, as well as a better alignment with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs of leaving no one behind, and especially the SDGs 5, 10, 11, and 16. One key outcome from this work was the virtual launch on May 26th of the new UNESCO publication on healing the wounds of slavery, which was built on these years of research. Another way in which the work of UNESCO can be observed is in respect of the UNESCO Cultural Conventions. I will not say too much on this because other speakers will address this more directly. But one of them I want to draw on is the work being done on the implementation of UNESCO's Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property, and by extension, the UNIDROIT Convention. The illegal trade in cultural heritage and cultural property around the world eventuating in their being disappeared, disassociated, or even destroyed can have a devastating impact on the region's associated communities, institutions, and cultural landscape. Barbados has benefited from the proactive work of the Jamaican government to engage museums and heritage professionals in intense dialogues in early March 2020 to look at the potential of artifacts to inspire. So in the context, finally, of this month's theme, I want to quote a few of the findings of that meeting, which I hope will be kept in mind as we move forward. For example, it states, the ability to inspire every genre, from music to film and performance, poetry, calypso, and art. Artifacts inspire design innovation. All of these methods of inspiration are derived from the interactions with tangible and intangible aspects of a culture shared. It does not matter if that culture is shared across time and space. The presence of the artifact in the contemporary allows for communication. That communication provides a ground for imagination and innovation that would be absent if the artifact did not exist to influence thought. Combating illicit traffic allows for the ability of the object to influence new creations and creatives. And finally, the trade in the traffic of illicit objects is the erasure of culture, and to engage in the loss of cultural identity, knowledge, and future education of a people. That intersection of illicit traffic and the creative industry is best summed up as the loss of a muse. The unknown artifact, if it were allowed to be studied, viewed, mentioned in a catalog, website, or meme, has the power to inform and transform knowledge, and in so doing, act as a trigger for the imagination. Heritage, as a result, has a unique power that we really need now to build on the ties that hold societies together when they're at risk of fragmentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, your words were very inspiring, and you have been able to bring that international focus to our work. I will now invite the Permanent Secretary in the Division of Culture, Mr. J.V. Wiltshire, to speak.
Good morning. It gives me great pleasure this morning to welcome you to the launch of Heritage Month. And I am particularly pleased this morning, especially having heard the remarks that the director of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society and the deputy chairman of the World Heritage Committee said, when she, hope I have paraphrased her correctly, when she said that heritage binds societies together, and that is why the Prime Minister's Office, Division of Culture, places so much emphasis on heritage in terms of building national identity, building national consciousness, especially as we transition to a republic. So as some of you are aware, this month of activities is held every year to commemorate the inscription of historic Bridgetown and its garrison as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. More importantly, it is used to heighten awareness of the importance of heritage to national identity and development, as I said, and supports the many activities and programs that are held during the year. Now, the month of activities forms part of the work plan for the Barbados World Heritage Committee, which falls under the aegis of the Division of Culture in the Prime Minister's Office. Some of you are aware that the subcommittee comprises the following entities: the Division of Culture, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, the Department of Archives, the Natural Heritage Department, the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, the Division of Culture's Heritage Volunteer Group, as well as the National Library Service. Now, it isn't by accident that we have chosen the theme for 2021 to be building a heritage economy for sustainable development. And this supports the United Nations General Assembly's declaration for 2021 to be the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. Now, the focus of our programming will be placed on engaging the youth and communities and highlighting the link between heritage and the creative sector. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the program for Heritage Month will focus on hosting activities on the digital platform, although this platform allows us to reach a wider audience. And this is really a new way of reaching our target audience and has proven to be an effective and prominent tool in our public engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Barbadians, the calendar is packed with exciting activities ranging from lectures, webinars, exciting competitions, screening of previous programs, entrepreneurs, and promotions. And I really wish to thank the persons who have been involved in this effort, particularly the focal point, Dr. Sharon Johnson, who has been a virtual institution in this division in terms of heritage, as well as the chairperson of the Barbados World Heritage Committee, Alessandra Cummins, the deputy chairperson of the World Heritage Committee, Alessandra Cummins, and the chairperson of the World Heritage Committee, Mr. Steve Devenish. And I also wish to thank our postgraduate history student, Miss Samantha Allen, for playing an important role in this exercise. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the launch of Heritage Month. And I would implore you to follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, P.S. Wiltshire, for giving us a broad overview of the work of the ministry and the Barbados World Heritage Committee. I will now we will now screen a video that was produced by the Division of Culture that shows the contribution of the enslaved to the development of historic Bridgetown and its garrison.
When the first enslaved people were brought from Africa, and they were brought in around the 1640s or so, and by the mid-17th century, most of the work that was done by artisans was being done by enslaved people. And while they're not the ones who would have designed the major buildings in Bridgetown, their input would be seen and felt in terms of the work that went into building these buildings. A lot of the buildings were built with what people refer to as soft stone, that's limestone, but some of the buildings were also built with rubble stone, and then they were covered with a plaster and with some slats of wood, and we refer to that as a lath and plaster construction. And many of the enslaved artisans were responsible for putting that material on buildings. So when we look at the building itself, well, we might well understand that these buildings are designed by white entrepreneurs, by white builders, etc. The labor that went into it was done by enslaved people. If you go into Bridgetown now, in what used to be called the Lower Green,
With us this morning is Ms. Samantha Allen, a postgraduate heritage student at the University of the West Indies, to give her perspective on the development of heritage in Barbados.
The Honorable John King, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office with responsibility for culture, Mr. Jehu Wiltshire, Permanent Secretary in the Division of Culture, Prime Minister's Office, Ms. Alessandra Cummins, Chairperson of the Barbados National Commission, Mr. Steve Devenish, Chairperson for the Barbados World Heritage Committee and Site Manager for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison, Dr. Sharon Johnson, Focal Point for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison, specially invited guests. Good morning, everyone. I am honored to be a part of the launch of Heritage Month and to share a few short remarks with you. Heritage Month is when we as Barbadians are encouraged to celebrate and reflect on the heritage of Barbados. But what does that even mean to the average Bajan? Heritage is usually seen as part of what the tourists come to experience, but not what we as locals engage with or learn about. I take note that the recurring theme for Heritage Month is celebrating and preserving heritage, and that is with good purpose. It is necessary to promote the importance of not just celebrating our heritage, but also protecting it. I believe a greater exposure to our history and heritage will have a significant impact on how we pave the path and build on the foundation for the future of our nation. Knowing and passing on years of knowledge and tradition will allow us to not only form a greater sense of national identity, but expand on the idea of what our Caribbean island is known for, not just the sea, the sand, and the sun, and of course now Rihanna. As a postgraduate student in the Heritage Studies program at the University of the West Indies, it's disheartening that the enrollment in the program is so low. I was the only student at the time of my application, and as I am now about to complete, I believe there's only one other student who would have just commenced. I can only attribute this low enrollment to applicability. What would I use my degree for? First thing everyone assumes when it comes to history or heritage is that the goal or desire is to teach. Well, this is not erroneous in some instances. This is not always the case. We don't show the youth that there are options other than lawyer, doctor, bank manager to be sustainable and fulfilling forms of employment and contributing to the country. What about the archaeologists, the archivists, the anthropologists, the curators, the conservators, the researchers, the managers, and so many more? What we lack is a viable open market where young people, which I would still like to consider myself as, are able to acquire gainful employment without having to use these newly acquired skills or knowledge to go abroad to seek out fulfillment in that applicability. Then we in the Caribbean are forced to outsource these services when required. A more integrative and interactive approach from as young as primary school may encourage a greater interest in the heritage sector. But it's not just the schools, but the homes that we need to target. We need to reach our local Barbadian population and incite interest in them so they too would want to share these things with their family. We can look at wider academic program selection in Barbados and the Caribbean that focuses on different forms of preservation and conservation. Spark interest through school tours by having an interactive as opposed to a visual stimulating session. Creative arts exploration and celebrations in schools outside of Black History Month or African Awareness Month. Heritage site specials that include historic rides or tours to multiple locations that are geared more towards the locals. The use of social media to engage with local consumers, radio programs that involve prize giveaways to increase awareness and interest in our sites and our programming. Create training or volunteering opportunities in the sector that the youth can learn through a hands-on approach outside of an educational or theoretical course. Community-based programs to highlight heritage specific to those particular areas. And also a greater stress on heritage unique to Barbados that holds international consequences, like the Newton Slave Burial Ground and the Blackwood Screw Docks. There are a number of things we can try to do to encourage the younger generation to have pride in and be a part of the developing of the heritage in our country. And I hope with the completion of my degree, I can aid in that development and help to create a greater awareness. It has been my pleasure to be a part of the planning for Heritage Month, and I look forward to the wide range of activities in store this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samantha.
Our
Wise
Bridgetown
words
jewel in
indeed
our
from
crown,
the youth.
worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. This meeting place, this melting pot, this century point for the builders of our nation. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison.
I got
Pick it
it.
up.
Thanks,
Our
man.
military, we celebrate for centuries of history. Tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Pick it up. Our Bridgetown jewel.
Wise words indeed from the youth. Ones that we should heed. Thank you very much, Samantha. I will now invite the chairperson of the Barbados World Heritage Committee and the site manager for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison to give his report. Mr. Steve Devonish.
Good morning, Sharon. Thank you. Chairman of UNESCO National Commission, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Culture, Prime Minister's Office, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The celebration of World Heritage Month in June is extremely significant. Not only does it commemorate the achievement of Barbados in terms of having a UNESCO World Heritage property, but it also allows us to focus and bring together people who usually work on a daily basis in promoting cultural heritage throughout the life and breadth of Barbados. The theme this year, building a heritage economy for sustainable development, is a natural and important and critical one. As chairman of the World Heritage Committee, the challenge over the last year or so has been what has been the challenge for everyone else in terms of how do we work and communicate. Notwithstanding that, the lockdown has afforded an opportunity and encouraged us to find new ways of promoting and getting on with our work. The composition of the committee, as outlined by the Permanent Secretary's remarks, shows the integrated necessity for us to continue to push and promote the concept of World Heritage in Barbados, not only because of our designation of Historic Bridgetown's garrison, but in terms of our effort to bring to the outside community what we consider to be important in Barbados. I must say that it is important for us to remember that where we are now is not something that happened over the past 3, 5, or 10 years, but in actual fact, it represents the culmination of the growth of people even before independence until this point in time. I must commend the Barbados National Trust, the Barbados Museum of Historical Society, the Barbados Institute of Architects, as 3 institutions who promoted this work for a long, continuous period, not to mention Professor Henry Fraser and Dr. Carl Watson. These people have promoted World Heritage and culture in Barbados for quite some time. Our eminent position within the UNESCO is really a distillation of that process, a distillation of that journey. What we've started to do now within recent years is to basically use the respective organs within the committee and to encourage the members of the committee to promote the concept of World Heritage. It is not something that we bring to as a single point. For example, over the last 12 months or so, our main focus has been more one-on-one with other institutes and departments who are doing planning and development work within Bridgetown. The Natural Heritage Department works very closely with the Town and Country Planning Office, where we screen and look after plan applications. And a lot of the work to give vigor and purpose to our World Heritage is done in a way that people will not see and you will not be aware of it on a day-to-day basis. Behind the scenes, it's what some people call soft administration. But nevertheless, it's important to give a grounding to World Heritage, to give a grounding to concept. I was particularly impressed by the previous speaker in terms of her plea for the development of cultural heritage. It is important for us to know that each of us contribute to the heritage of Barbados. Your grandparents, your mother, your father, your life story, what is said at funerals, maybe read eulogies, all these things chronicle the development and the history of Barbadians and people on a day-to-day basis. As carpenters go about doing their work, masons, plumbers, they all contribute, tradesmen, tradeswomen. So although we are focusing on World Heritage Month in this particular way, I would not want the public to think it is something that is exclusive to the general public or it's a distillation of the well-to-do. It is in actual fact a celebration of all that we do, and probably one of our biggest challenges in the past, in that we have not highlighted the plight and the achievements of those ordinary Barbadians. We intend to do that going forward as much as we can, just as it is important for us to encourage business people within the historic Bridgetown garrison area to use the designation, probably in their address and their promotion, to make reference to what we've achieved so far. I'm extremely happy that we are having a very diverse and intense month, and I would encourage all Barbadians to join and help us in our celebration and participation. As chairman of the World Heritage Committee and the site manager, it is beautiful to see how Barbados work can move from the local arena to the international arena as we participate every year and every other year in the World Heritage General Conference, and also in the UNESCO General Assembly through our able chairman of World Heritage National Commission. And with those few words, I just hope that we find it within ourselves to not only look to what is doing during the month, but to look to what we do throughout the rest of the year, to recognize that the architecture, the culture, the music, all of it contributes to who we are. And the celebration of historic Bridgetown Garrison represents something that is of an international flavor, but it has also been defined by our way of life and our existence for quite some time. We look forward to promoting other sites, and we look forward to bringing the collective's wisdom and experience of Barbadians to focus on what we call our Barbadian heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Devonish, for an extremely thorough report. I look forward to working with you during the coming year. You would have seen a video throughout the course of this launch. That video was produced by the then Ministry of Creative Economy, Culture and Sport, and it shows the level of contribution made to the development of historic Bridgetown and indeed heritage by the enslaved. So this video will be available on our Facebook pages and also on the National Library Services YouTube channel. And we urge you to share it with your children, with your family members, because it is this important to us that we see that we have a shared responsibility and a shared heritage as it relates to the development of our heritage. The feature address will be given by the Honorable John King, Minister with responsibility for culture in the Prime Minister's office. Minister King has embraced fully the use of technology. His speech has been recorded and he is viewing the proceedings from the National Library Services platform. We now welcome the feature address by Minister John King.
Mr. J.U. Wiltshire, Permanent Secretary, Division of Culture, Prime Minister's Office. Mr. Steve Devonish, Chair of the Barbados World Heritage Committee and Site Manager for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Dr. Sharon Johnson, Focal Point for Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Ms. Alessandra Cummings, Barbados Museum and Historical Society. Members of the Barbados World Heritage Committee and staff of the Division of Culture, members of the media, members of the general public, good morning, everyone. 3 years ago, when I took over the mantle of Minister responsible for culture, I vowed to raise the profile of heritage and the way it is perceived in Barbados. I saw heritage then, as I do now, as the new frontier to be crossed to generate economic activity, provide jobs, improve communities, and build national identity and pride. As Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, responsible for culture, one of my greatest desires is to see the heritage sector firmly implanted in the creative economy. It is a sector that holds tremendous promise for Barbados. The recurring theme for Heritage Month has always been celebrating and preserving heritage. This year, in keeping with the UN's declaration for 2021 as the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, the theme for Heritage Month is building a heritage economy for sustainable development. The UN declaration encourages countries to undertake activities aimed at highlighting the power of creativity for resilience, to share best practices and experiences, enhance human resource capacity, and to promote enabling environments at all levels. The past year has seen the closure of heritage sites and heritage-related businesses, resulting in a tremendous reduction in earnings and, in many cases, loss of jobs and contracts. The heritage sector, which is largely dependent on tourism, has had to pivot, with some managers using the time to rebrand and convert some of their services to online content. As we build momentum towards becoming a republic, increased levels of sensitization will be critical to understanding who we are. More so, it is important to remember that Barbados has a shared heritage, one that involves other social and racial groups who have also contributed to the development of this little rock. Therefore, our calendar also encapsulates those stories and several lectures to provide a better understanding of these diverse racial groups. The path to understanding, appreciating, and celebrating our heritage will take many forms. The removal of Lord Nelson clearly shows the need for more dialogue at the national level amongst all racial groups. The celebration of Africa Day on May 25th and the hosting of the Inter-American Week for Persons of African Descent in March are but two ways in which we use poetry and fashion as separate pathways to knowledge. No doubt, for the sector to thrive, we have to find better ways to engage the youth of Barbados. They too must see the sector as a viable career path that can provide a wide range of jobs, including curators, filmmakers, authors, conservators, researchers, and game and set designers. The sad reality is that over the years, the number of students studying history at secondary and tertiary levels has declined tremendously. The question we must now address is, how do we make this subject more appealing to the youth? We in the Division of Culture intend to work closely with the University of the West Indies and the Ministry of Education, as well as the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, to support wider public education and awareness for this youth demographic. We have also earmarked a number of initiatives for the future that can gain Barbados traction locally and internationally among heritage communities, researchers, and persons interested in Barbados's heritage. I can at this point announce that in August this year, we are proposing to open the Slavery Research Center at the Archives Department. We are working assiduously with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society to develop the Newton Burial Ground as yet another place for research. I end by saying that our heritage is what makes us Barbadian. It is what has been handed down to us by our forefathers, whether it is tangible heritage in terms of our finest mahogany furniture and rum products, or intangible heritage, such as the way we prepare our food, our burial traditions, our language, music, and other cultural practices. Let us celebrate and preserve our heritage because our past strengthens our future. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to participate in the wide array of activities which will be hosted online. I now declare Heritage Month 2021 open.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our morning's program. And at this point, I would like to thank a number of people who would have worked tirelessly in the planning and coordination of this month of activity. This includes the members of the Barbados World Heritage Committee and the Subcommittee for Public Education and Awareness. It is important to note, as P.S. Wiltshire would have said, that this committee is responsible for programming not only in June, but throughout the year. And their good work is evident by the various tours, publications, lectures, and training undertaken. This year, we had with us a very special group of students involved in a National Give Back program, whose presence brought a new spark to the planning of the programs. Your contributions are very much appreciated. A special thank you to the Minister, Permanent Secretary, and staff of the Division of Culture who continue to support this effort. This year's calendar is tightly packed with a wide range of exciting activities. And once again, everything is online, which speaks to our resilience and creative imagination. It has indeed been a learning curve, but we were guided by a couple of young persons who opened our eyes to the possibilities of this social media platform. To this end, I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to Nathan Corbin, Kezia Goodman, and Ariane Grosner. A special thank you to the Heritage volunteers who each year continue to pull out all the stops to ensure we have a tight and exciting program. I must thank the members of the subcommittee who continue to come up with also innovative activities to add to the calendar each year. These being the National Library Service, CBC, NCF, the Barbados Museum, the Archives Department, and St. Mary's Church. Thanks to the various team members and volunteers who are working tirelessly behind the scenes, even now, to gather data and to submit and disseminate information. A heartfelt thank you to the Director and staff of the National Library Service whose support cannot be measured. It is their platform that we are using. Thanks to the various speakers this morning, June is an extremely hectic month in which we find ourselves running and being involved in back-to-back meetings relative to heritage and culture. But it was so truly grateful to our speakers, Minister King, B.S. Wiltshire, Alessandra Cummins, Steve Devenish, and Samantha Allen, who consented to participate with us today. We invite you to view the calendar, which will be available on the various Facebook and Instagram pages of the subcommittees, this being the Barbados Museum, Barbados National Trust, CBC, NCF, National Library Service. Tomorrow, we will launch the Heritage Book Challenge, whereby we are encouraging persons to nominate 5 books related to Barbados' history. And we invite you all to participate. Ladies and gentlemen, we wish you a happy Heritage Month, and we look forward to engaging with you throughout the month on our social media platforms. Thank you and good morning.
When the first enslaved people were brought from Africa, and they were brought in around the 1640s or so, and by the mid-17th century, most of the work that was done by artisans was being done by enslaved people. And while they're not the ones who would have designed the major buildings in Bridgetown, their input would be seen and felt in terms of the work that went into building these buildings. A lot of the buildings were built with what people refer to as soft stone, that's limestone, but some of the buildings were also built with rubble stone, and then they were covered with a plaster and with some slats of wood, and we refer to that as a lath and plaster construction. And many of the enslaved artisans were responsible for putting that material on buildings. So when we look at the building itself, while we might well understand that these buildings are designed by white entrepreneurs, by white builders, etc., the labor that went into it was done by enslaved people. If you go into Bridgetown now, in what used to be called the Lower Green, or now in the area now known as Jubilee Gardens, not far from St. Mary's Church. There was what we call the slave chambles. That's where the enslaved people bought and sold. It was well known by the white planters and the merchants in Bridgetown as a place where they suspected that enslaved people were taking some of the produce of the plantation and fencing it in Bridgetown. Now, very often we see the huckstering taking place in Bridgetown, or the hawking. And I have to say a little something about that, because throughout the Caribbean you have these various terms. You have the term hawker, which is used in Barbados. It's an English term, but then you also have in Jamaica, you're a higgler. And in another place, you're a huckster. But that culture appears very early in the history of enslavement in Bridgetown. So sugarcane, we see sugarcane being sold on the street corners of Barbados now. And sugarcane was sold on the streets of Bridgetown. Of course, enslaved people were not supposed to have sugarcane for sale, but they sold it. And the shambles, you will sell sugar cakes. So one of the features of Bridgetown life was that in some cases, enslaved people who had won, I don't want to call it the right, but they won the privilege of existing on their own account. So the market activity that you see in Bridgetown, which continued during the period of enslavement and beyond, and continues to this day, that itinerant peddling that takes place on the streets, that is pretty much a contribution that the enslaved people brought to Bridgetown. So it's a social contribution rather than an architectural contribution.
rich town, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. This meeting place, this melting pot, this entry point for the builders of our nation. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Big it up, our military, we celebrate for centuries of history. Big it up, tradition and culture, our heritage. Historic Bridgetown and its garrison. Big it up, our Bridgetown, jewel in our crown, worldwide renowned, from Garrison to Kensington. This meeting place, this